Cool. So, Cora Mesophyll. I just put in a few bullet points there of like what we were trying to do with the project. We wanted to develop a kind of a theatrical narrative that considered the computer as a performer, which I'm sure you're all already familiar with this kind of thinking in your own work. And so from that point of view, I kind of felt I felt that I wanted to kind of rewrite a kind of a script with the computer as a kind of a character, and considering the computer as a kind of an organic kind of character within the framework of the script. So in that sense, it was the the computer had kind of like like commands, you know, like it had what's the word? It had its own choreography, kind of, or the stage commands written for it into the script. The idea came actually from, it was originally supposed to be a theatrical reworking of, what's his name? J.G. Ballard is the author of a short story. It was actually his first short story. It was called Prima Belladonna. But then I contacted the estate, and they were very adamant that it shouldn't be used for theatre ever. So that was that. So so it ended up being a performance inspired by Prima Belladonna. So his story was this idea that it was kind of set in some kind of like biofictional future, and the main protagonist, a female character, she sang to plants, so there was kind of these kind of like bioengineered kind of crossbreed plants between, I think, insects and plants. You know, it was kind of like just genetic engineering and biofiction. So from that point of view, we wanted to get this idea of Regan, who's a singer and actor, and unfortunately she can't be here this afternoon, but we wanted to get across this idea of her kind of jamming or singing with these kind of plants that had a certain amount of arbitrariness, but also like a system of kind of rules built into them, you know. So in that sense, the audio was incredibly important for the production. Even though I'm mainly going to talk about the actual generated scenography, the projected scenography, because the sound designer who I brought on board, he lives in Germany, so he can't be here today, unfortunately. But he's very, very, very talented sound designer, and he works a lot with this kind of like motion tracking stuff. So like the project was kind of broken into two chunks. We spent about maybe 6-8 weeks or something on it, just playing with different ideas. We went. I had drafted up these kind of designs for interactive scenography, and then I drafted Cindy into the project, and we just basically had a play in here for a couple of hours each week, over an extended period of number of weeks, and then we, using these kind of like these scenographies as kind of jumping off points, then we kind of developed the scenography, we developed the choreography in relation to the designs that I built. So to that extent, then the scenography or the interactive projections were already influencing the choreography right from the get-go. So we gathered feedback, or I gathered feedback from Cindy and Regan, and in relation to the rehearsals, with the view to developing this second leg of the project, which was the actual performance that was part of the festival. So we kind of gave ourselves this hard deadline to actually produce the work, which has good and bad aspects to it. Puts you under a lot of pressure, but makes you turn out something. So there's good and bad aspects to that. So at the end of phase one, I made this documentary. Do I have it here?
That's the first one, isn't it?
This one.
There it is, yeah.
So if you're interested, you can go to my YouTube page, and let me just put it up on the screen there for you. So this is a documentary with Cindy and Regan. It's just a conversation, really. Just they're having a discussion. The sound isn't great, but it's clear enough. You can definitely hear what they're saying. But it wasn't. I kind of wish I had put more effort into making it a little bit more professional, because you can never recreate the conversation. But it was a really good one, and there's some really interesting reflections on the work in there. And I'll just put up a few quotes on the board, but that's on my YouTube channel if you want to go to it there at any stage to get some to get some reflections on the work. But it's a really interesting conversation.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, sure.
Just that the conversation, as Néill said, came at the kind of midway point, I suppose, in the process that we'd done the initial devising, which was literally Néill introducing me to his designs. And then based on kind of reflecting back always to this story that we knew we were going to adapt, how does that relate? Where are the correlations? What designs will work and what don't? What, when I go in and move around with them, which ones do I feel like I can connect with immediately, and which ones are much harder work to find a relationship? And so that was, so those conversations with Regan then, and Regan was part of that experimenting as well. Those conversations then came at that kind of midway point before we actually got into proper rehearsals. So I think it was great to go back over and watch that again, because we definitely had a lot to say about the process even at that point.
Yeah.
And what worked for us.
It's really useful, and by all means, if you feel like accessing it for citation or anything, no problem at all. Just go for it. It's on my YouTube page. So I just pulled up some quotes. There's one here from Cindy, I think. She says, "We've already started making some choreographic choices based on the responsivity of the graphics." So what's happening? So it's happening before we even know why, which is kind of exciting. I think this is answering a question in relation to, does the computer influence what we do? So when she says, so it's happening, before we know why, it's like that's in relation to the computer influencing the performance. She said the idea for us to work in a spiral movement actually came from the movement of the rhythm, which was one of the graphics, because it had a very circular feeling to it. So you had this kind of spiral movement that was kind of very evident in the final production, and that had really come from the computer graphic itself. It was a very organic spiraling thing. So it's a constant process of feedback loops. I just pulled up a few what I thought were interesting quotes from that conversation, because I don't think that I'm not going to subject it. Like, it's actually about 45 minutes, 50 minutes long, that interview. So it's a bit rambling. So I've just tried to pull out some interesting bits. There was also this idea of trying to from Regan's point of view, she was very, because she was the main actor, she was very involved in setting up this intention, you know, between herself and the thing that she was supposed to be interacting with. And she felt that she for her, I think for her own peace of mind, she needed to kind of give it some kind of an identity, some kind of and in that sense related to something organic, which she did. She felt it was a little bit like a pet, or, you know, like interacting with the kind of an animal, you know, because it was. It doesn't always do what you want it to do, but it's kind of like there is some rules there that it can kind of like riff off, you know.
Well, it was that, and it's also the actual shapes that you chose to design, the kind of the textures, and you know, because there was this very soft bit on the end of a very, very long, thin kind of branch, like, but they had this very gentle, curious quality about them. Again, because of the gravity that you built into it, the physics that you built into the program, that if it had a different type of physics, you wouldn't have that kind of, you know, a cat or some kind of little animal coming towards you. So it's like the physics and the actual look of the graphic really conveyed a lot, even the colors and things that you used, because we played around a lot with color as well. And that all completely informs your body. It's like you pick it up on a level with your body before you can even articulate what is going on. Your body just instinctually kind of responds off of those things, if they're very clear, and your graphics were really clear, so that's why they were great to work with.
Do you have some samples we could look at, just so we would know what
I'll just push on to.
I'm not trying to move you out of your order, but it would be really helpful to hear see what you guys are.
So
it's, when she starts to interact with them, she looks.
Oh, so the ones in the background are projected. So basically everything is dependent on the movement of the performers. It's all reacting to, one, their voices, and two, their body movement. So even the soundtrack, what you're hearing. So I'm just trying to get a bit so you can see the actual movement on the backdrop is the best.
Yeah, it's a bit further on.
I'll show you. I'm going to do an actual tech demonstration, but you can't really see the vines. That's not in focus. Sort of a gravity built into it that kind of reacts to the proximity of the actor.
Who's not singing? They're all singing.
The one here is all the one here on the ground is also reacting. There was like the story, the original story had this. There was this thing that he had this plant in his workshop he called it a tuning plant or something like that. It was like this, but this one that was very kind of possessive of. He wouldn't let her go near it and stuff. So there was this. That was for us was the dramatic intention of, you know, Regan trying to get the plant on the floor, which was this kind of this tank, and
then the babies were at the back.
Yeah, these other ones were kind of like the ones that were for sale or whatever. You know.
So it was meant to be in this plant shop. One of the challenges with the floor projection was that to try to create the illusion that it's a three-dimensional space, even though it's projected onto a flat surface. So then that's what I was constantly thinking about with my movement, which is before this bit and a little bit after as well. and then Regan's movement later on in the piece of considering that rectangular shape on the floor to be a kind of a big tank, that's quite large with this entity.
We also had 2 cameras set up. There was one looking in at the stage and there was one looking down. So in that sense, we were able to get 3-dimensional mapping of the space for the 2 performers. So in that sense, like the sound kind of was a big thing, and kind of filling in the gaps for the kind of the 3 to actually turn the space into 3D, I think, rather than just these flat projected surfaces. Let me just push on a little bit.
I think it's more in the later after her singing.
Yeah,
the next section is where she really interacts with the back projection.
This is so.
Yeah, that bit.
This bit.
I think it's more obvious.
So that's the kind of like that's the kind of the conflicts that we set up there, was the kind of the possession of the control over the organic environment.
Because Cora as a character she was sort of part human and part plant.
Yeah.
So her singing is really, it's like in a way another manifestation of who she is, but at the same time it is who she is. Like her self in this kind of human body image is not, it's her singing is who she really is as this kind of plant entity. And so this is why she can connect with these two different plant entities, as we like to think about them, better than the person who's meant to be Joe, who's meant to be the caretaker of the whole situation. So then
the scientist.
The scientist,
It was this kind of like art versus science thing kind of running, this kind of undertone running through our. I mean, it was mainly for us, right? Because it probably wasn't necessarily all that evident to to the general audience.
No, I don't think so.
But although a couple of the kids got it straight away, right? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That was so funny. But so Cora's intention is to try and get into this big plant that she almost has this kind of like kind of love attraction for, so after a little bit of conflict, you can kind of see this spiraling movement that we were talking about earlier with the arms. And so there's this particular one is also built on physical algorithms, but these ones are more about fluid rather than the background ones, which were kind of springs and gravity. So there's just a slightly different maths underpinning the actual the architecture of how the graphics were built. I actually thought the movement on this one worked really well, with the choreography. But all the time you can see this problem that we just talked about earlier, is this trying to turn a 2D space into a 3D space. Does go on for quite a few minutes, so let me just skip forward a little bit.
Well, it finishes. So at the end of the piece, the idea is that Cora eventually gets her way in a way. She kind of wins the battle or the drama that's going on, and she merges with this plant or with this other entity.
Yeah. So there was also, I mean, kind of, it's funny, if you should actually read the story, it's quite interesting, the Prima Belladonna one, it's quite, there's this, it's almost like as if she's a kind of a pollinator for the plant, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it? There's that thing going on between the, like the literally the bees that pollinate the flowers are kind of like, head buried, like, right into the middle of the flat plant with their bum in the air, and it's quite a comic, when you think about it, like from a human point of view, it's quite comical to kind of prostrate legs in the air, like it's quite a, so it's,
Pollinating things.
yeah, so, but there's also, it's kind of interesting from a point of view of the technology, depending on your stance on technology, is, are humans a vector for technology, or is technology a vector for humans? It's kind of like this. These are some of the ideas that we were kind of exploring here.
Well, it is interesting that the difference between the back projection and the floor projection, at least in my reading of it, the floor projection is much more interactive, sort of draws the figure into it. You really feel it's in the same space,
Yeah.
as opposed to the back projection, which feels a little slightly more.
Yeah, it's quite
kind of a gap.
Yeah, it's removed, and for the actors to interact with the back projection, they were kind of turning their back on the audience, and there was kind of this. There was a bit of a weird dynamic that didn't really work. Kind of like the back projection thing. I don't know. Like, I mean, the whole.
Well, the choreography here, it just integrates with the graphics, really.
Yeah.
In a beautiful way.
It is, as you said, it's a responsive system. And it feels responsive in exactly that way. way that the system responds to the movement, but the movement, I don't know, but I have this feeling that it really doesn't really respond to the graphics as much as the system does to the movement. So it, for example, in this example, that it feels that the movement is sort of like moving along, whether or not the images are there or not. I don't know. It's just a really short
Okay.
demonstration, and
Sure.
I don't really know how it goes. But
Yeah.
from this show, it just feels that the dancer is sort of like dancing,
Yeah.
and then there's these visuals, and the visuals are reacting to the dance.
But
But the dancer could dance it anyway, you know, without the
this is-
visuals
Well,
as well.
this is, you know,
this is the
this is the
difficulty.
question, you know,
Yeah.
you know, there is a power play.
You have to, and for me, what seems to work with working with this kind of technology is creating choreography in a different way. And most of the time, when people think of choreography, they think of a set of repeatable steps, right? So you have these phrases that you repeat, or sequences that you repeat, and you always do this bit at the same place on the stage and in relationship to the person or the lights or whatever. I find that creating choreography in that way for these kinds of systems doesn't really work all that well. Because unless you know that piece of movement so well that you can really transcend it and not be thinking about it, it's really in your body, which is something that happens anyway when you're learning dance. So, I'm sure it's the same with music. You practice a piece long enough, it's in your body. You don't have to think about it. So if you can get to that place, I think there is a bit of a flexibility. But I find that it has changed my way of making choreography to work with this technology, because you have to make it more like a structured improvisation rather than a set of repeatable steps. It works better. So with what Regan was doing, that's what was going on. I gave her a structure, I gave her a certain set of movements, and she had to also move at a certain speed, otherwise none of that would have worked. But the arrangement that she chose to put these movements into was completely up to her in that moment.
Yeah.
So there's a breathing space, so there's a communication space that happens if you create choreography in that way rather than kind of the traditional way, I find anyway.
What
But
I sort of like meant maybe was I think I'm sort of like maybe watching the video and seeing something that I've seen before, as I've seen sort of like technology and dance combined, is that the dancer seems to sort of like be really focused on herself and on the space. And this is a question of the virtual space.
Yeah.
Because it's not tangible. So it becomes so that the performer starts to a little bit turn into the movement and into herself. And then there's this world of movement that's the visuals around her, but somehow they are not, you know, connecting.
Yeah.
So that it's kind of like her doing it eyes closed. It looks like she's, and that's really what really often happens with dancers.
I agree.
Is that the movement is sort of like the main point for the dancers, which is obvious, but it shows when there's like two things on top of each other.
Yeah.
And so it starts to, and there were the images were really complex as well on the example. So it starts to sort of like be this. There's like two entities, but they are not really. They are on top of each other, but they are not in the same.
It's not totally integrated.
Yeah, there's some sort of, and it's to do with the focus of the dancer. It's to do with the complexity of the movement in the visuals. It's to do with how it's tracked, how evident the tracking is, where it's mapped, the data, the tracking data, what it does. It's all a really complex mess of you know, it's like a twine.
Yeah.
Everything's really intertwined.
Yeah.
anyway. But then there's this sort of like a little bit of a distance between the dancer and the visuals and the technology.
Yeah,
Somehow.
yeah, and interesting enough, I actually encountered that when I worked with the Mighty Spaces lads and the two dancers that I worked with in that piece, and most of the work was to get them to stop looking at the floor.
Yeah.
And that's a training thing, that's a performative thing, because most dance training does not teach you how to perform.
Mm.
Performing and learning a dance are two separate things.
Yeah.
But there's this assumption that if you can repeat the steps, you're performing. Do you know? And they don't actually teach dancers how to perform properly, how to actually look and engage with an audience, how to open up their bodies and their minds to, you know, that kind of feedback and incorporate it into what they're doing on stage. So.
It's because the dancer needs to make use of gravity and respond to gravity and work with gravity. That's
But like you're responding, your feet are responding to gravity right now,
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
don't have to look at them.
no, but
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but
Like-
Rico has to.
Yeah, I was about to say, you didn't know him for very long.
but so
I'm not
whatever we're doing, we have to sort of.
respond to
That's
gravity.
the material. That's one of the materials that we work with.
Sure, yeah.
And the virtual actually doesn't have to sort of, so we have, when we are reading a performance,
Mm-hmm.
we don't read the gravity aspect
Mm-hmm.
in the virtual.
Mm.
So I'm just playing with the idea now.
Unless it's built in, I suppose, like that responsiveness to proximity, and either, you know, going towards or going away in a really simple.
Yeah, it's
choice.
really hard to sort of, for us to, as spectators and performers,
Mhm.
also as to it's a new thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because I think that the visualizations really kind of do make that, they really delineate, you know, the performer's body from the background or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny, like the audio. I remember when Regan gives quite a good reflection on the audio in that video and in the interview. But it's kind of, when you're talking about the audio, you're talking about it from a point of view of like the space becomes thickened. I remember that was kind of a simile, or
Mhm.
it's like cutting the fabric of space, and it was really, audio seems to give that three-dimensionality, that visualization. Well, projected light seems to like take that away a little bit. Yeah, it seems like there's more. It seems to me there's more possibilities for audio. You know, with
It's
this
because,
technology, because of the,
you can't really shut yourself out from audio. If you
It's
can hear.
everywhere.
It's, if you have a sound, you hear it and you respond to
can.
it. Well, you can't, but it's more
Mm-hmm.
sort of like pervasive. Is that the
Mm.
right word? It comes through
Mhm.
really
We do
easily.
hear with our eyes though.
But if you have
Mhm.
like,
We do.
for example, if we have
And
this
you
really
skip.
big, you know, visual element that would circle the room
Mm-hmm.
and it would hit me at some point, I could really easily ignore it. It would just, you know, go past me and nothing happens.
Mm-hmm.
But if a really loud, really big sound would come, and really suddenly a bang or something, I would react to it like, well,
Yeah.
what's going on?
Yeah.
There's the difference.
Yeah.
And that's what I think I saw in that, is that there's this whole process and these actions going on in the visuals,
Mm-hmm.
but they are not giving impulses. They are not sort of like mandatory impulses. They are impulses in the sense that the performer can imagine that, okay, now I take an impulse from that and use my imagination that it hits me. That this huge thing comes and, you know, it hit me.
Mhm.
Oh no. But I have to imagine it. It's more of a theater thing, sure. But it's not sort of like, it's not mandatory. For sound, it's more primal
I would
somehow.
disagree, since if you, instead of the really loud noise that comes straight at you, if
if you have a really bright
Yeah,
spotlight
that's
coming
right.
at you, you'll react to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
they
yeah.
have to be sort of like thought in a little bit different ways, and the visuals. I think that for me it's really hard to get the visuals to have as much impact on the performers as they do on the audience, because the audience can see them as a whole, the performer and the visuals. But when you're in the visuals, you sort of like get lost. You really don't know what is what. You're in there and it's a mess, and it's really hard to know what's going on. And
That was a real problem with the interactive, with the virtual reality research as well, you know?
Yeah, it's true.
Was
Yeah.
trying to relate the objects within the virtual space and trying to visualize them in the real space, which was an empty space,
Yeah.
effectively.
Well, that's actually what I've found useful in my work is that for example in this case, this like Teemu said that it's the visuals were rather complex, and also the movements were quite complex. So every now and then, if you have a very tight synchronization, so that you can actually see that when I'm doing this, then that happens.
Yeah.
That usually helps both the performer and the audience to really sort of feel that now they're interacting. But if it's all the time, you know, there's lots of happening in the visuals, and the dancer is doing all kinds of movements, and you can't really feel the sync in the whole piece. I mean, then you there's no point to grab into. I mean, that's what I think that if you every now and then you have a kind of a pattern that is really obvious. But now when I do this, that happens. It usually puts things into a perspective. Then you can do all kinds of things, and it stays in mind that okay, this is in sync, and that happens because she does that, and so forth. And you can sort of manipulate.
Oh, I know
these
exactly
situations.
what you mean. I mean, I also think it depends on the piece, because I think part of the challenge of this piece is that we were kind of embracing the idea of complexity, like this really complex idea of this woman not being quite human and not being quite plant, trying to work with two different visual spaces and make them equal, if that's possible, and then the relationship between the scientist and the plant woman, and then the relationship of the sound as well. So we kind of knew we were taking on lots of things, and we just went, yeah, let's go for it. And bring it on, you know?
Yeah, and thank you for presenting this here, because there are certain elements that really interest me, like the membrane-like quality of the back projection, and the sort of almost abstracted interaction. It wasn't as it was at points it was really clear what was interaction and what wasn't just sort of pulsating quality.
Yeah.
It was like touching a spider's web, and it would move like this. So I really like that element in the performance.
Yes, and the atmosphere in general, it was really nice, and I like that really very much too. But like I had the feeling, like Teemu said, that the connections, it would be, if there would have been some really, you know, obvious connection, like synchronization, I don't know, maybe it would benefit, maybe not, but that there was a feeling that for somehow they, like Teemu told us that they didn't sort of connect so obviously. But it looked nice, and it felt nice, and sounded nice. But that's enough.
I guess that was kind of a bit that was kind of a decision not to make it so obvious, really, because we didn't want it to kind of come across as a kind of a touch screen or something like that. Okay. We were trying to get across the idea of a kind of an environment that was organic, or to a certain extent not totally interactive and a little bit haphazard, you know, like a natural forest, but like just in moments of interaction, moments of obvious interaction, but keeping a kind of like a certain arbitrariness to it, and that's, you know, that's why I chose the kind of particle system kind of visualization approach, because you can't control them. Like, you know, there's all these collisions going on within the system that are totally out of your control. The only thing the dancer can control is herself. So in that sense, it's a little bit like being in fluid or something like that. But yeah, no, that's some interesting reflections. No, but I do see where you're coming from, and I do agree that there is a lot of. I think there's a lot of ground that needs to be made up on the visual side as opposed to the audio side, because I think just the very fact of projected light needs to hit a surface for it to be, you know, for it to concretize, means, you know, that fact in itself is you know, is delineating the actor from the environment that you're trying to create. You're trying to create the illusion of her being in an environment, but at the same time, the projected light is pulling that illusion apart.
Casting a shadow and, you know.
Yeah, casting like a great big shadow.
But it's still theater, so
Yeah.
you can sort of like get through that with traditional theater means. You can make it work with just basic theater. It's just technology, but there's definitely, you know, issues with how and why and why is that there and why is it doing that and is it. I really recognize your thought on this organism that sort of like has its will of its own. With Ilkka and we have both done similar stuff. Yeah, but there's problems with the approach. Is well, obviously there's a problem. Sort of like, does it make everything a little bit fuzzy? When you make it fuzzy, you know, it starts to become so abstracted that it might break apart. Or I think that's for some work that we did, it happened. That it just, when you start to make the interaction less obvious, you start to break up the interaction. And at some point, there's actually no interaction, even though technically there is, but you can't really see it.
Yeah.
And then it's like, where is this? And it's kind of interesting, but there's something that's sort of like, it feels a little bit like the machine broke.
Yeah, I think Regan's reflection here is quite a good one in relation to what you're saying, because she in relation to, you know, should the dancer be, you know, within just, you know, eccentric, you know, like just kind of immersed in their own movement, or should she says, should I give it heat? And she says, I think it's quite a good one. She says, part of me thinks just allow it to respond and give it no heat, because it's hard to predict what it's going to do. Or should I turn around and give it all my attention and play with it? How much importance is it given in terms of power on the stage? I think that's a really important thing. In terms of dramatic choices, it's very interesting to me. Yeah. So, there is that notion of power of, you know, should she be giving it all her attention? Or and then there's like there was also the audio as well, which was something, you know. Basically, the audio was something that had to be kind of wound up. So from the very, very start of the performance, where it's very kind of muted and just kind of like just haphazard, kind of like little squeaks and bubbles and things like that, the choreography had to literally, the way the audio was programmed is that the choreography had to wind it up, literally, like to get momentum into it. So that you could, like, at the climax point, where there's this kind of conflict between you two, there's the two of them are spinning around, like, you know, literally to crank the system. So that, I mean, that was one of the things that we kind of gave to the computer, you know, one of the pieces of power, you know, like we let it have, you know, so like literally like it was waiting for you to you know.
That is exactly I think that's one of the main points here when you're dealing with a computer and generating, for example, music with a computer in this way. It's like when you're playing a violin, you know every note and you feel every note that you play and then you control every note. But in this case, when you're using a computer, you can program it the way that you can just press a button and it does everything, or then you can pick every note. So you can go all the way between those situations. And that's what I think is the most difficult thing here, to make the decision and to give the feeling that now I'm controlling something, now the computer is controlling something, and to be in between and to play with these things. That's the most difficult thing here.
It is, yeah.
Plus there is the motion tracking system called the human head attached to the spectator, which is really hard to pull.
Let's take it away.
Yeah.
What is this thing you speak of?
Heresy.
Yeah. So and that's that's in the end that's what you need to sort of respond to also.
Would you guys like an actual demonstration of it working?
Yeah.
Yes,
please.
Sure.
That would be great.
Thank you.
It'll take me, like, if you want to take 5 minutes to just walk
Good.
around, stretch your legs or something, and just
I
sorry.
just found, I just found something, this is one of the reasons why I love working with Regan, is because you can see from earlier on, she's incredibly articulate, and she thinks really deeply about performance, and she's also a very, very good performer and great improviser, because she's just got the ability to respond and be very immediate in her body to lots of different external influences. So we were at a really difficult point in the process, and she came in with this whole thing written out about the dramaturgy of the work. And it was so fantastic, but didn't ask at all. She just literally showed up and said, "This is what I was thinking about last night. Here you go." And it's quite a chunky, and then you added some things to it as well, which then opened up a whole other avenue of talking about, well, how is it that you take something that's a narrative and abstract it, but not abstract it too much, and you get that performance across, plus working with the technology. So as a performer, you're trying to remember your steps, your words, the audience, 2 different projections, and a soundscape simultaneously. How do you do that? So these are the sorts of questions that we were asking. Anyway, she just wrote this whole thing, but there's one bit that I wanted to read you. There's something in the struggle between humans and machine here, control over our environment versus growing within it. I see a world where the movement qualities of the people reveal some kind of characteristic in their attitude towards this issue. We can communicate with an immediacy or an immediately responsive environment in a tactile, physical, and vibratory language. Or we can use objects to control and create a distance from it. So.
Yeah, she's very theoretical in the way she works. It's really
That's
good.
actually an interesting thing that you said about the controlling lots of things at the same time, and that's what I've been working for quite a while in this musical context, because there are a lot of things that you would like to, for example, if you're using a gesture-based instrument, like you have only so many gestures that you can do at the same time. And if you want to control many things at the same time, you have to have a kind of a world wheel. So you have to have one wheel that you turn that changes a lot of things. And then you have to map the other things the way that, but when I turn the wheel like this, the other things do the thing that I wanted to do when I turn the big wheel. So it's a play of sort of mapping different kinds of things in different kinds of situations with a simple movement to do all kinds of things when you want to do all kinds of things.
Simultaneously.
Yeah, simultaneously, because you can't really, you don't have you don't have hands, you don't have legs, you don't have enough anything. So I mean, you have to be able to sort of map different kinds of things and take the mappings in use when you need them. And that's actually what I'm trying to do all the time, but it's really difficult because there are a lot of options all the time available, and then you have to decide which option I'm going to use and how I'm going to use these options. If I have a lot of options, how do I choose these options in a performance, in a situation?
That's also that you sort of like do stuff with your body that, or control stuff that you wouldn't control otherwise, and still you somehow want to make it look that it's not made natural, but that it's not so hard, or so that it's somehow fluid, or it looks good or something.
Yeah, they come together, I think.
Yeah, and the things that you do are, if I move my hand like this and something happens, that's not natural. It's not something that happens, but we sort of like make it, and we have to, when we map these movements into other things, we have to think that what the movement is it natural, or does it feel that, okay, that movement belongs with that data and that output? Is that sort of like, is it mapped right?
Is there a resemblance between
Is
the movement?
Is there some meaning with the movement, the mapping, and the output?
And then there's also the point that you have to remember that while you're performing, you can't remember many things. That, for example, for the control, that your pinky does that, and your middle finger does that, and when you turn your hand, it does that, and when you put your hand like this, it does this.
And when you make a shape like that,
and when you're performing, you don't remember all these things. It's impossible, and especially if they change, when you go to the next part, the pinky does something else again. So
that's all in the philosophy of the digital. It's referential. It's ones and zeros. They don't mean they're just ones and zeros.
Yeah, they don't understand if it's
refer
your
to
pinky
something
or
else.
your thumb.
But that's, I mean, I think if I get this right, you're talking about mapping movement on a kind of a grid space,
well,
or no?
It's whatever.
Whatever you want to
So
map
is
it to,
it-
but
is
in
it-
general,
It
mapping.
can be in 3D play space, or it doesn't really matter what the space is or what the.
Mapping is
mapping in
mapping is a
general.
program term. It's a programming term, you know.
Well, it means that you take something
Yeah.
and take the data out of it, and use that data, that movement data, to do something to produce an output.
So you're taking.
Okay.
So this is programming speak. It's kind of like you're taking choreographic data
Yeah.
via the camera, and you're mapping it into another system, like a music library, for example. So it's a term for literally translating.
And it's
You know,
not so
some
much choreographic
extra
data,
data.
it's even more basic, it's movement.
Yeah.
So the computer doesn't really know about choreography. So
Okay,
it's just movement of something mapped to an output.
No worries. Okay, I'm not being clear. It's language. See, this is one of the very interesting things, is the language barriers or mountains, passes that you have to climb through to get to one another's territory. And it's a continual challenge, because a lot of the words, we use the same words, but they have completely different meanings altogether. So mapping is something I would call I would call the entire space, like looking at the space as a whole, and the points within the space as the map, rather than.
That's one.
That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But taking the points and using them for something
Right.
else. Then
So what I'm wondering is, because I know
You
that
can
like
map-
Todd and I used to do that, or look at the space in that way, and he would go, okay, when you go to this quadrant, this happens. When you go to this side of the space, that happens.
Yeah.
We tried that. I found it horrible to work with it in that way.
Yeah.
And so that's why we just opened up the whole field and just went with
But
speeds.
that's only one way of mapping. The other way is like you can map your movement. Like this is 0
Yeah,
and this is 45,
okay.
Yeah.
and then you can use the information. This is about 20, and so forth. And when you move your hand like this, you get a pattern of numbers, and the numbers can be like points on the screen,
Sure,
or they can be whatever. They can be sounds or whatever.
sure.
So actually, that's what mapping is all about. It's like it's tracking movement changing it to numbers,
Mm.
and then giving the numbers another meaning.
Yeah.
And then you can control, when you can move your hand, you can see that the point is moving like that. That's the basic thing. But you can map it to anything. I mean, anything that can be connected to your computer.
And you can make rules and so forth. And
Yes.
it can be,
And if
it
I
can
move
be
faster,
really,
it means something
really
else.
complex. But
Yes.
I don't think the point is here to be
No.
really complex,
No.
but just to sort of like maybe think that, okay, what if I want to produce an output, and by output I mean visual or audio or lighting or whatnot, whatever. And you want some movement to produce that output, then I think it's really important to think what the movement is and what the output is. And do they, in a sort of like meaningful way,
Relate to one
relate to
Sure.
one another? That's the
Sure,
basic
Yeah.
idea of mapping. How do you take something and put something else and get another output out of it?
As a complete outsider, just it seems like there's two things to this, like that. It's like this one is that you're either going to make an extension of yourself with the visuals.
Well, you can use it in any way you want to, but this is just like the technology that if you want to track movement, you have to know the position.
But what I mean is that, like from what you're talking about, is in like that it's either it's a separate entity, and like to show then in that space it's a separate entity. Like that you know, the person who's dancing is one, and then the other thing is something different. So there's obviously some kind of struggle or interaction in that way to show that they're different, or else that the visuals are an extension of what, like you were talking about your hand, that your hands.
You mean the
making something.
relation?
Yeah, the relationship, so that to show,
to
like,
what's
so the
happening.
dynamics are going to show
Yeah,
whether
yeah,
it's
exactly.
a separate entity
Yeah.
or it's an extension of what you do.
You can be like both at the same time, of course. Sorry? Well, how?
Depends on how you
Yeah, it depends.
program it
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, it depends on how you use
What,
the
how you use
map-
the
sort of like the mapping of the data it has nothing to do with how you want to, or what the concept of the piece is. It's just
Well, Let's give an example.
Maybe I got it.
Let's give a simple
Sorry.
example. Like you have an avatar over there. And I'm walking and moving my hands, and it does exactly the same as I'm doing over there.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, I can map the data that when I'm doing this, there's an explosion over there. Every time when I do this, and the avatar is just moving his or her hand the same way as I do. This is mapping. Then you can map the same thing, that there's a light. Every time when my hand goes down, there's a light over there, and it goes away when I take my hand up. That's mapping also. So you can map it into anything, the same movement, and that's actually what I find is one of the big problems, is that if you have different kinds of things happening with the same movement,
Yeah.
how do you relate to these things?
Yeah.
I mean, if you have all kinds of if you have many things happening, when I move my hand, there's an explosion, and there's an avatar, and there's a light, and there's a projection, and
I'd like to
there's
see
what.
that one.
Yeah.
How can you tell?
Yeah.
What am I controlling now?
What does it mean for the audience?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's
If
our
that
job
If
as
it
an
happens like
artist.
60 times per second,
Yeah,
because that's
also
basically
possible. Yeah.
possible to do, so that things happen all the time, all the where it just becomes exciting in some ways, but at the same time it becomes really hard to know what's happening and what's controlling or what's following and who's who.
So is there a danger of it just becoming really self-indulgent?
Well,
It's
just
about-
too
It's
complicated.
it makes it just hard to follow.
Mm.
I think that's
But this, if you make a choice, that it doesn't matter if anybody really understands the connection.
Yeah.
It looks nice, it sounds nice, it feels nice. That's enough.
Mm.
If
But,
it's
but,
a
if, but if
conscious-
you want to
Yeah.
control something, then you have to know, then you have to think about it, that now I'm mapping this to this, and if I want people to focus on that, what I'm doing over there, then I have to have the possibility to do it if I want to. That it's not hazard, it's meant that it happens like this. Then I think it's nice, because you feel that you can guide the audience a bit. It's not just random things happening. And that's what I think is nice as an artist, that I can influence the performance. It's not just hazard.
Matthew, what did you think as a spectator sitting, because you're the only person who is in the room who was a spectator at our performance, so what did you think when you were
Well, I
sitting?
think the question that I asked when it was over, which of course I really loved, and I thought it was very beautiful, but the question that I had was that I had very little access as an audience to what was going on with the Ballard story. Had a hard time knowing why I was watching these things.
Yeah.
Now, they were very lovely to watch, and I'm just as good at anyone of just going back. But it seemed as if there was a meaning underlying that there was noise and I couldn't get it translated. You know, so I don't know how you would have been able to do that, but I think my problem was it was very hard to know. Like, even now I sort of prefer watching it on video because I can sort of concentrate on the beauty of it, you know, without worrying about what in the hell is Cora Mesophyll and you know, what is this narrative? And all that did was sort of create confusion for me.
Yeah.
Where if it had just been called X, you know, or dance piece number 2 with technology, you know, I probably would have felt more connection with it. But since a narrative was implied, but not fully, for me personally, not fully linked in a way that I could translate and articulate and respond to, that I found that to be, that's a challenge, and I think that's what you guys are talking about. It's a necessity in that with that mapping, is that you're translating the action into something, you know, we keep using the phrase meaningful, which is fine for now, you know, but something that, you know, the audience knows what to do with. And it can be, hey, it's just beautiful.
Yes,
You know, there's
exactly.
nothing wrong with that. But if you're being teased a bit and saying, here's the story, but, you know, it's not going to be fully fleshed out for you, then that was where I had the problem.
But yeah,
I mean,
we also made a decision to kind of break it into 4 separate scenes that were a bit like station drama to a certain extent. That the scenes, there was no attempt to kind of blend these scenes into each other as a kind of a story. That was kind of like we kind of focused on 3 or 4 metaphors, which, you know, obviously in retrospect caused confusion for the audience.
well, not
but
for everyone. You know, you said those young people seem to have gotten the story right away. So, you know, I mean, these things you can't always judge, you know, by one.
Yes, and I think that there's also the thing that it's as long as it's obvious to yourself when you're working, it helps, because I always find helpful that if I have an idea of a structure, and it doesn't necessarily show at all in the performance that there's an idea that I found that it's related to space or whatever, but it's for me. When I'm working, I have a sense of a structure, and it helps me to do my job. And whether or not the audience knows about the structure isn't important, but it keeps the whole thing together for me. That's important.
But it's an ancient problem again. That, and I think it's good, Matthew, that you mentioned translation, because it's about meaning and translation. Again, we come back to that. Just last week at the WAG Society in Amsterdam, we were talking about the Australian Aboriginals and how they communicated over vast distances. Like if there was a sandstorm coming, they would play a bull roarer, and because of the quality of the sound, it carries a long way. And you can't see as far as the sound goes. So they would be able to connect the sound of the bull roarer with the sandstorm, and so they would be able. The next tribe would be able to. They would be ready for that, and so. But there was a sign system for that. That there was a meaning for that specific sound, specific way you play the bull roarer. You would be able to connect that with the sandstorm. So it's all.
Well, anything in performance always has so much to do with context.
Yeah.
And if you did a piece like Cora Mesophyll in a workshop, setting, you know, where people were invited in just to sort of see it as a data, there'd be a different complete expectation on that. But, you know, for better or worse, when you give it the formality of that performance, you are in a sense saying, hey, I am sending you information. You know what I mean? I am really trying to make a point here or give you an experience. And so then I think you're under a different obligation. You're outside of the workshop and experimentation, and quite frankly, the audience doesn't care.
Yeah.
You know, they're sort of out on a Friday night, they'd like to have, you know, I hate to put it these kind of crass terms, they'd like to have a good show.
Yeah.
You know, to sort of take it up. So it's really why I think, you know, at this level, oftentimes experimentation and workshop is so useful for us. You know.
Right.
And we can't just translate the data into the purely digital form. It doesn't mean a thing. So that's just a tool.
I mean, it has to have some kind of an outcome always.
Yeah.
But that's what that's what you were talking about, this delivering information. It's like in gestures, in dancing. Of course, there's a tradition of movements, and people understand certain movements in a certain way. Of course, it's like speech or text or the same thing goes with music also. Like in Western countries, we have certain kinds of harmonies that we like, and in the eastern part of the world, that there are totally different kinds of harmonies and scales that they like over there, and they have information inside of them, and as soon as we hear something which sounds Eastern, we associate it to Eastern music, and I think in dancing there must be the same kind of thing, that there are certain movements that you associate in a certain way in a certain culture, and you always, of course, you take use of those. But in this mapping thing, you can map it into whatever, so you don't have any of these traditions yet. Yeah. And that's a certain kind of problem if you have an information from the movement which takes you to East. And you have an explosion or space when you do a certain movement, it's a kind of a distraction in a sense, because there's no relation. And this is also the material that is what I find is exciting and important, that you can make these distractions if you want them.
Yeah. It's sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, with the language of dance, what's difficult, I find, is that audiences have a hard time looking at dancers on stage as not humans. Okay, maybe it's not like that. It's when you have more than one person on stage in particular, they always think those people there's a drama. They read narrative into those humans on stage. And most dance, and particularly a lot of the stuff that I work with, not always, but it's very abstract. I'm just moving for movement's sake. But I can't ignore that tradition of language, of physical language, that is a precedent, that I have to accept that if I walk towards someone and reach out my arm, it actually means something. Even though if I might be thinking about, I'm extending my physical body into the virtual space towards this other entity, you know, whatever, people will stay. So that's also the tricky thing of like creating choreography that acknowledges that language, or the language of dance, but at the same time you're trying to create something different. And that's what technology can do with the sound that corresponds to the movements, with the visuals that meet the body or go away, or there's some relationship with that light, with the visuals.
But isn't it interesting, throw this out, see if you agree at all, but that so much of the digital performance that you see in this area has a very similar aesthetic. You know, I mean, what we might see in Chunky Moods, or what we might see in Obermeyer, you know, and what we see there is a very similar aesthetic going on. So even though the codes are being established, maybe not to the benefit of the form, but there are, you know, already, I would say, you know, visual codes, if not even cliches, in what we see in these projections and the interactions with those.
That's something that definitely needs a lot of thought.
Yeah.
I definitely recognize that, and there's definitely cliches and,
Yeah.
and things, and I think most of them, I'm not blaming anybody, but
Okay, go ahead, point your fingers.
not myself at
Yeah,
least.
no, not me, of
But
course not.
it's not laziness, but it's because those kind of forms and shapes and colors are easy to code. They're easy to make.
Yeah,
It's harder to make other kinds of forms, other kinds of patterns, structures, visual language.
yeah,
It takes more time, it takes more effort.
yeah.
You have to be more adept at coding. You have to. It's just harder,
Yeah.
and I think that's the main reason why they sort of like look the same, because that's the sort of like the not the surface level, but the next
Basic
level of the
Basically, yeah.
yeah. So
But
but
there's
that's
also
definitely something that
I think that goes with
Well, that's true with synthesizers.
Yes,
You know
and
what I
it's-
mean? They're
and
cliches now.
and also with traditional instruments.
Sure.
You tend to play same kinds
Absolutely.
of music. It's with all arts, it's the same thing, because when something gets popular, there are a lot of people that want to do the same thing, and they want to be in the same genre. And if you do something else, then people don't recognize that this is the same genre anymore. And then you're outside. Then you don't get the funds and so forth. So, I mean, that's the law of nature, so to say. I mean, it's people follow other people.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to be an anarchist in this sense. If you do something
I still
totally
want to be an artist.
But I think that's very interesting what you were saying about, about scales, musical scales, and there's a language there that we can relate to something. We can go, yeah, that's Eastern music, or there's a kind of an established system of codes there that we can make sense of. But in one sense, there is no established system of codes in computational performance. But there is, because what you're saying is that already there is a genre like that people want to be part of. They want to have an aesthetic similar to Obermeyer or Chunky Move, or But in a sense, it's pure calculation, and there's so much you can do with that. There's so many possibilities. You can make an explosion go off in the corner, or you can't. But then there's a danger of becoming completely arbitrary.
And I think it's also built into you yourself, because you have a filter of your own.
Yeah.
And you have a tradition. You've grown up with some kinds of aesthetics and music and art and everything, and no matter how much you try to get rid of all the garbage that you gathered all the time, it's really hard. It's really difficult, because in the end, when you start doing something totally else, then little by little it turns again into something else that you've been doing before, because that's what you like. But so it's you yourself. You're the problem, or me. Or us.
That's why, as a father of three and a senior lecturer, I still want to be an artist.
So you have to learn to walk first.
Right. I'm going to give a demo, because are we going to? Well, we'll probably run a little bit over, if that's okay, because it's already 10 to 4. But
What is our schedule for we're supposed to?
the schedule is kind of to finish up around 4 o'clock, isn't it? So, but we I'll just run through.
Yeah, let's see a little bit.
The two audio-visual, the two visuals and the audio. Now the audio, I have to say, is the audio is not the audio that we used in the performance, because that Max MSP patch is far too complicated for me to manage. We need to invite Aidan over to work it, and he's in Germany. So I'm just going to run through like a basic FM synth in Max and motion tracking, but I'll show you the system. Do you mind if we just take a bathroom break before?
Yeah.
One,
Thank you for the presentation.
No, I actually got what you were talking about with Matthew. It was interesting how he kept going. I was like, but I understand.
Cindy talks best when she's moving.
I know, this is it.
You ever sit on a chair, you gotta talk like this.
I keep folding myself up.
I have to just stand up.
I know, that's great. Let's get rid of these desks. Yeah, no. It's just that it reminded me of like when I first started working with Todd. He showed me how it worked, how the very nervous system worked, and he said, okay, we can make this one-to-one correlation, and we can make the whole space like into quarters and halves and thirds, and he worked that way with this guy who had a kind of clowning mime background, and it worked really well for him because he could always hit that exact same mark in his face and be so incredibly specific. And he did juggling and he did all kinds, but it was because of his training, he was really great. So we tried it with me. It just didn't work at all.
Well, if you want to,
it was so interesting.
If you want to move from grid-based trigger systems, you need some other technology basically, or some other algorithms or something else. You just need. What we are, for example, now using grids to go.
Yes, we are, but in a different manner.
I'm just going to check
basically a little bit the same manner, but
actually,
we can
do you know, I need to ask everybody to just stand out of the way because I need to take a screen grab of the empty stage.
But he just opened it up to recognize speed change.
Now I remember why I learned
that.
Yeah, you and I spent a lot of time together. On that, I was.
Not hit the same.
I really enjoyed where we were headed.
Especially in order to really
inspired me to.
your eyes and keep yourself in relation to the environment around you.
Start to
I'm really happy about your contribution
if
to
we
the
want
book as
to
well. So
make everything work.
Thank you for
Computer is nothing.
no, well, when I
Well, it's not.
It's not working.
No, but I mean,
computer is really precise.
The publisher says, oh, you need
So you
to
have to make some rules.
it was very precise.
Yeah.
The way we used it, and then with each patch, we would just change it, just tweak the numbers up and down, sensitivity levels. That was it, and like narrower parameters for some parts. Some parts we left it really wide. Yes.
Yeah. Well, those are very short chapters.
Would you mind just standing in the middle so we can see if it's picking up 6
Really movements. I want to make something really
Oh, yeah.
Can you want to draw
sounds like
You always map a wide
if I wanted to sound like that, that's it. If I want to make
which I enjoy the hell.
really precise notes or a melody. If I want to make this kind of movement and I wanted to play the Stairway to Heaven and I make this, that's appropriate.
Did you ever publish on
play the Stairway to Heaven melody?
Well,
Is it repeatable?
Sometimes it goes the other way around. You have a sound image that you have to make a movement for. So for me, sometimes it's the other way, depending on the concept.
The traditional way, there's a CD player, you start the CD player and then you start moving with the music. That's kind of the traditional way you get the input.
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about a sound, like a sound quality.
There is a part of the career trajectory with just getting it done.
Maybe it has a bit of bubble in it, so it actually goes up and down in tones, and maybe it's not.
Yeah, but you know what, they're not gonna reward
Maybe it
that.
folds inside
So,
itself, but I know that that's where I'm starting.
You're worrying about
And then
until
you
it's
play that sound,
perfect,
and
it's
then-
not gonna
And then you're running
translate.
with more. And then you start to mess with it.
Controlling the
I mean, that's what I was doing.
People are finished their sentence.
Somebody just jump in, I think.
That's how the French do it. Yes.
You just have to come.
found funding to do research
But
group
that's what I was
that's
trying to
around.
say earlier, but I didn't
Because
quite
of just
right. What I meant was
theoretical,
there are like
philosophical
two
problems,
applications,
and they
like
spell out
where they, what you try to do
technological or
is like creating a
political
chaos.
or
And then
aesthetic.
where to make that actually mean something, because the chaos is a common entity.
But you know,
So that,
everybody wants
like
to
that
do funding
separation that you're talking about, where
Yeah.
instead of
Yeah, that's why we got this
you
book.
didn't know really what was going
You know,
on.
you
and
just
that
say, oh, I'm
entity is
going,
actually
well, I've got an
doing
idea,
something
and I'm gonna
that's
hook it to a
working
computer.
outside
Sure.
of
It does
you,
not matter what
so
the
that you
idea
feel them
is.
as two
You're
things
gonna
that
hook
are
it,
working
yeah.
have both
That's the
kinds of
social
feelings.
impact.
Rather
As
than,
opposed to the other
you know,
person
all
who
the
just says,
aspects
I have this
are
idea.
an extension
You know,
of
that's
you.
fine.
Like very
But
different,
what are you
like
plugging it
dynamic
into?
and they're an extension. So what you're doing is creating something.
Well, I'd like to hear more about
You know
it.
what I mean? Does that make any sense,
You
Rose?
know.
So that's
No, not totally.
I know, I think I know.
that's the graphic that you saw on the floor.
You want us to reassemble?
I'm gonna explain this later. I will.
This is
Your attention, please.
this is the graphic that you saw on the floor. So this is the fluid system one, which is so basically, yeah, obviously Cindy's only able to walk along the bottom of it, but basically I programmed a patch in Max that allowed me to control the sensitivity. So other than that, I didn't control anything. It was kind of basically based on the speed of the body movement and oh yeah, sorry, I could control the color as well. So you can see there, it's kind of it winds up there. This is kind of closer to the end of the performance. I just kind of basically there's a variable called viscosity, which is basically viscosity in fluid is the thickness of the fluid. So if you think of like oil or syrup, at the beginning it was kind of like oily or syrupy, and then towards the end we had just let it go like completely just let it go completely like water, completely runny.
And what does the tracking now do?
The tracking tracks the location of the body
Okay.
in relation to the space. So basically the space is just mapped like a touch screen, pretty much. So
Is it
but-
funky, or should it track all the time, or
sorry?
not? Should it track all the time, or is there some algorithm that makes that it doesn't track all the time? Is it intentional? But
Well,
it
I could
doesn't?
I can show you on the computer upstairs, which the program that's actually doing the tracking is Open Frameworks. So I could switch off the tracking
Yeah.
to the point of
Should
from
it
the
track-
intent, or I can
should
tell it to
now
track one person,
track
or
her?
2 or 10.
Yeah. But should it now track her?
Yeah.
Right now.
All
It
the
is-
time.
What
It is-
happens if I come over?
If you come over, yeah.
Whoa!
Shit
I think also there's a dynamic with the colour of clothes that I'm wearing right now,
Yeah.
and that the system is not seeing me. See how it sees Matthew so much more
Matthew is
clearly.
more.
So
It's more
I have more computer charisma.
that's it. That's it.
Actually, it's the black clothes against the white background of the screen.
Yeah.
It could be something to. Yeah, we had to test different fabrics as well. You know, which ones reflecting
Well, I love
for
it
everyone.
over
I like it,
here.
Matthew.
It's very responsive.
You're a natural dancer.
Is there some kind of pulse? Wow. Is
It
there
also
some
has to do with those lights up there.
question?
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Matthew, go in the center and be our dummy.
It
for
slows down in this. Whoa, it's really going, isn't it?
Get your tap on again.
Yeah.
Now I didn't like you anymore.
No, I think it's this corner over here.
Yeah.
You know, is that purposeful?
Well,
Look
actually,
at Colin,
the-
it's
it-
getting
it-
going.
it's-
I think it's time to take a dose, guys.
If you think about it, actually, this
It
is
might also be because you get a bit more light.
you're
from
actually
this
really
side
close to the
than
camera
that
there.
side.
So
Yeah.
the camera's up here. This is the floor projection.
Can
So
you- Néill,
basically,
can you make
it's
a
really
demonstration?
only accurate when you're standing right at the screen.
Oh, look at that.
When you go closer to the camera, you're taking up this huge amount of space.
Ah, okay.
in the field of vision.
Yeah.
dots.
Yeah. I'll show you if you.
It's okay, we want
Do
to
you
see this.
Yeah, yeah. Go
This is-
against the screen again.
Yeah. If you can just demonstrate what it does, because it's a little bit.
Wow.
That's great.
Yeah, I can't, like, this is like the
Is there
last part.
some kind of pulse that does the the twitches, or because it does this really fast movements
all the
is
time.
that,
It
is
seemed
that
to be
a pulse or something?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is there?
It-
I think it's really got something going.
You've got a refresh rate or something.
Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Is there anyone with photosensitive?
But I'll say, that is so much fun to do, as I'm sure you found out.
Yeah.
But that's what I think you want to do with your audience.
Yeah.
You want to make it that as much fun for them to watch as as it is to do, because it's a real treat to play with.
Can you tell us, Néill, why does it do the twitching?
Yeah,
Is
that's a glitch. That's a jitter.
Okay.
It's something in the. It wasn't programmed by me.
Okay.
It shouldn't
it's
do
just maybe it's some kind of refrain rate
Okay.
thing. It's because also it's using UTB network.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's probably like missing the odd because it's also wireless. It's coming from a wireless router.
Yeah.
So it's not getting the full amount of data, and if it gets some weird data, it kind of just ignores it or drops it or drops a few frames to catch up. Like streaming, like Skype video or something like that. That also works.
Kind of like makes it a little bit hard sometimes to follow what's happening because of the twitching. At times.
Ooh, what you do there, lads?
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean.
Yeah.
You're sort of like all of the time. You're sort of like, what's happening? Why did it do that? you can't really tell that if it's intentional or
The controlling
if it's
is
buggy
isn't
or
that obvious.
yeah, there's some kind of sort of like buggy. The twitching is definitely something.
Yeah, like to be honest, like there's a lot of noise, like there's visual noise for the camera.
Yeah.
See, there's lights on in the background.
Yeah.
So if you want to be really, really accurate, you need to control your light very, very carefully.
Yeah.
So these lights up in the corners here have infrared filters on them. You're familiar with this setup, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So if you want to be really accurate, there shouldn't even be a hall light on out there, because you're getting all these kind of weird reflections.
That's probably why it took more movement from this side.
Yeah. But
When you come here, this is like I can't really understand anything here. If I would be performing,
Even the
it would
exit
be
sign.
really, really hard to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Especially now because this is so big
Yeah.
and I'm so close.
Yeah.
It's just like, whoa, what this is. And for you, it's all pretty clear.
It looks really good. It's like a lumbersexual, fixing.
Well, actually, this particular scene, or this setting of, this speed setting, was to kind of connote chaos, or she was just about to break the system. Basically, this was with the very last scene. So, if I went back to the beginning, where we've kind of got it here, it was, this very kind of very muted movement, or it's very viscous and slow, so slow that there's nearly nothing happening. And that's all. That was controlled through the Max MSP interface that I made here. So you're welcome to have a look at that as well.
So if I move a lot, does it do a lot? Or
Well, it depends on whether I let
I
it.
found the motion to be the less I did, the more active it got.
so if I'm really still, it's more active.
At least, I don't know.
Well, now it's. I think it's.
Yeah, no. If you're really still, there'd be a bit of noise coming from the lights in the control room. But if you're really still, it should just about not move at all.
So if I move a lot, it should do something more.
Yeah.
That's right. Sweaty!
One nice output.
Actually, the movement.
Okay, so they're programmers and they're dancers.
The movement for this particular program is only tracking the center of the body.
So my hands don't do anything.
No,
Okay.
they weren't really doing anything.
You could have told me that.
No, it's much more interesting.
I need to do this.
I did have the hand. We did.
The Finnish folk dance. This is what Riku and I had to do in his defense.
Yeah, that's how it went down.
Now you will do the traditional Finnish folk dance.
No, this is play the Barry Manilow stuff and do
Yeah,
that.
there you go. That's all we need is a little Mandy.
Okay. I kind of get it.
Yeah.
Kinda.
That should be a little more normal, that setting. But yeah, I mean, there was too much data. If you start tracking all the hands and feet, it's just too much for the system. It's just like, I mean, there's so much going on. It's just going everywhere. Like.
Well, would it be possible with that camera? Because I mean, it takes
Are you
rather
tracking blobs
accurate.
or?
Yeah, it's
Just
blob
blobs.
tracking, but you
Yeah.
can isolate the hands
Okay.
and the feet and the head
Yeah.
and the center of the body. Yeah, just through blob tracking. It's just basic motion camera.
Just
or
a
web camera.
stupid kind of question because I don't think I'm so familiar with the setup actually. So that's like an infrared stuff that tracks the motion, or
Yeah,
I just what?
this is a camera with an infrared filter.
Yeah.
There's two lights on the side, shining infrared light
Definitely like
onto the screen. So it's kind of punching out a kind of a silhouette
Yeah.
of the body shape,
Okay.
and then you can take that silhouette
Somewhat
data
green screen.
and project graphics in relation to the location or the size or whatever.
So working with this one, and we talked about this before, but this is
Okay.
because this is how you said. I found it difficult exactly for the reasons that
Tuo kamera ei tietysti näyttää liikkuvaisuus.
Wes just saying that you have to be
Se
very
rupeaa
close.
trackaan tietysti sitä.
Yeah.
Then you're really limited to a certain spatial
Yeah.
thing, and then you're so close to this, it's very hard
It's
to
hard
see.
to do the movement.
And also, I mean, we talked about at one point of having a monitor down there to see what's going on back here, because that's, I used that before with Todd and I found it really good, so that you can face out. But it wouldn't really work with the piece for
Yeah.
various reasons. But I think that's, as a performer being up here with this kind of thing, if you can't see it out there, how can you possibly know?
What
I
you're
don't have
doing.
eyes in the
Yeah.
back of my head.
Yeah.
So you have to constantly turn your back to the audience.
Yeah. So this is
So this is just one of the.
this is like natural to be like this.
Yeah.
And if I turn like this, I have no idea what's happening there.
So,
Absolutely.
Well, I guess that was the thinking, and having it a little bit more abstract. It's less to try and make it a little bit less important as to what actually happens behind you. Whereas, like in the virtual reality setup, it was absolutely crucial because you're literally controlling your avatar. So you really had to keep referencing what was going on in the virtual reality. Whereas this was abstracted.
Yeah. But that's a spatial, so like scanographical decision where the things
Yeah.
are.
That's the translation issue again, that the idea we didn't go there very much, but the idea in the auto workshops was to turn off the screen at some point.
Yeah.
That you had already internalized, sort of integrated the avatar into your own sort of psychophysical activity, and so you would be able to do all that without the screen. And so,
Of course, you could do it without even knowing what's happening there. That's a solution as well. Just put somebody here and make some movements, and that will track in, and it will produce something.
Yeah.
And I don't really have to know it.
The one that has the
That's also interaction, although
thin
it's
stocks on it.
one-sided.
Great.
Yeah.
So
That's for the audience.
That's called marriage.
but so having experienced the demonstration and having seen the beautiful presentation that and the beautiful show that you did. What would be, if you had to name 2 concrete things, both Cindy and Néill, that you would do differently if you do the show now, what would those things be? What would you do differently? Where you mentioned something about having a monitor and
I'm personally, I think to work with these kinds of projections, and particularly because you have to be so close to the screen, I really do think it would be advantageous to have a monitor in the front that you could just check in with. You wouldn't have to be, staring at it the whole time, but it would just be there as a reference point to be able to really see how it's working behind you. So then I would feel more relaxed as a performer to have that one reference point, definitely. And also maybe the second thing is, it was just a time constraint. We didn't have Aiden, the sound artist.
Right.
He wasn't here. Yeah, he wasn't here for very long. He was only here, came in kind of at the end of the process, and that I found was a real pity, because obviously, not only because of the piece and the nature of the piece, but Regan as a performer, because sound is kind of her first, like my first language is movement. Sound is her first language. So I think we could have played more with that and deepened that, and even played with the dialogue at the beginning. It would have affected that, or we could have experimented a bit with even that section and extended that relationship with Aiden. I would have liked to have done that.
Yeah. Going forward, I think that I'd like to get away from coding. Coding. If there's something to change going forward.
What did you use for this?
This is processing. This is what I was working in here.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
That's what I'm working with.
Yeah.
So you're writing this. You're basically writing. This is Java. This is Java code. And
you didn't like it.
Oh God, it's a killer. Trying to work with this, even Max MSP is a stroll in the park compared to this. It's really hard to read this. It's really hard to do anything on the fly.
Did you learn it for this project, or have you done stuff beforehand with
these are things that I was developing over a number of years before I even started the PhD. Literally since my master's in computer science.
Okay, so you.
So this is this is where I started learning how to program code.
Okay.
And it's been kind of an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
But I haven't really done much coding since Cora Mesophyll. I'm trying to look for other ways to visualize stuff, like using more Max MSP, or possibly there's another newer program called Touch Designer, which I also use, which is a little. It's like Max MSP.
Yeah.
Have you guys working on your MacBook, or do you use PC?
Sorry?
For the touch design.
PC. It's only available on a PC.
Yeah. So you haven't tried it on your Mac with parallels and.
With what?
With parallels by installing Windows PCs on.
No, it works. Like a lot of people, you can run it on a virtual machine on your computer. Yeah, definitely.
I really like this sort of membrane spider web.
This this actually should be coming down to you, and I have a feeling it's because of this noise coming in from the thing.
So just turn these off?
No, don't turn them off completely. I'll just adjust it.
It's definitely something there that you want to do.
Yeah, I love that delicate hair. Oh, can I have one more thing, not just 2 things?
Yeah, of course. No, just to keep it,
Yeah, no, as always, time.
Yeah.
And then just in a really general sense, there's always more time to experiment, more time to develop the images, develop language, movement language, spoken language, yeah.
So in that case,
I'm not sure why that's not reacting.
if you had to come up with a sentence to convince potential funders, what would be your argument for the funders? Why do you need so much time?
I think that there's no proper working process. There's no language. It's such an early stage. I think that the language and the working processes need to be developed.
Right.
From my point of view, there's no established working process with this. It's all still very experimental.
Yeah.
There's even the software is still at such an early stage that it's very hard to develop work in this. Like it takes so long.
Yeah.
And I think the language between the choreographer and director, artistic people coming from the School of Art on one hand, and then you've got people coming from computer science on the other. There needs to be more integration, I think, at an earlier stage in education, actually.
Yeah.
I think, like, you can't do computer programming in an art school.
Yeah.
I mean, I came to art school, and if you mentioned like teaching programming and maths to art students, they'd be like, "What?"
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, from a point of view of like creating an infrastructure and an environment to develop this kind of work, I think it needs to happen in undergraduate level, or possibly even in school level, to be allowing art students in school to use computers to develop stuff, to develop their projects for their school examinations.
And vice versa.
And vice versa, yeah, and the flip side, obviously, for science.
Yeah.
So, as a choreographer, would that be your sort of argument that we should educate the programmers more?
I don't know why that's
with the language of dance?
And educate dancers more with the language of programming. I really do think it goes both ways because more and more performing artists are using technology in many different forms, but they don't really know the capabilities of it because they haven't really gone into it.
There we go.
And for me,
Is that a bit better?
It's been experiential.
Okay.
Not actually, like studying things properly, but sort of being thrown into these situations where I don't actually know what to do.
Yeah.
So you make it up as you go along, and oh well, that didn't work very well. Oh, that worked better than that.
I understand.
But I somewhat agree with Néill is that there's no established, like in theatre, there's become a 4-week rehearsal process to put on a show. Do you have that same?
Yeah, I think
there's this, and I think part of it is a funding constriction. The funding bodies here.
Not as tradition, but the experience in that direction.
Yeah, and personally, I think it takes a lot longer to make some work. I prefer to work over a longer period of time, even if you're only getting together, like I was saying, for a week, and you let a month go by, and then you come back for another week, and then another month go, so that your ideas have time to gestate and to cook, and you can write about it, you can dialogue about it, and then you kind of feel like you're almost at the point where you're immersed if you don't get in there and try.
What you're doing with your fingers there, I think, is a kind of a kinesthetic empathy that we were talking about earlier.
To do that, well, it seems to respond to that, but maybe not. Maybe I'm just imagining.
It's kind of related to tapping your foot to a beat.
Yeah.
Because at that point, we had just got made in 1 week or whatever. I think it was about a 10-day stretch that we had at university. We made a lot of discoveries. And so those guys could then go away with that information, change things, bring it back, and then we could try again, and then we could try again. So because it just needs a lot of hours of experimentation. I mean, that's what I find is most satisfying in working with this technology, if you allow this, this is what it is. And getting in there and figuring out, and then well, what happens if I do this, and what happens if I do that, and can it go faster or slower, can it be a different color?
Yeah, it's like light, electric light has been used in the theater for a long time now, but this was what was going on when they first introduced electric lighting to theater. And they had to do this.
Yeah.
They didn't just, like position the lights and
No. They had to actually by hand carry them around. Yeah. If they wanted them to change.
Yeah. So.
And hope that they didn't go on fire.
Néill, is this that now working the way all the time that the dancer is actually controlling what's happening?
Yeah.
Or does it have a mind of its own also? Do you have the kind of system? For example, I was really wondering here that might be interesting that it would be a kind of a creature. When you go over there, it starts coming towards you and looking at who's coming over here, and then you start throwing it away. Go away! I don't want you over here.
Yeah, like
then it backs up to some corner and changes its attitude and comes again and tries to make a contact. Because that would also be an interesting view that you're not controlling and trying to move the creature, but the creature has a mind of its own, and then you're trying to interact with the creature.
Yeah, that's kind of what it is. The parameters that I had here are kind of gravity parameters that I've changed it there. It seems to be stuck. I can't even fully remember how to use my own max patch. This is the other. This is
But it happens. It happens.
Yeah. Well, see, it's got a mind of its own now.
I think that the sort of like the trouble with it is that it doesn't have a parameter for working on its own. So that when I come here, I actually start controlling it because it's the same parameter for the creature's own movement and the movement that I'm controlling. So it doesn't really, when I control it, it doesn't really have a mind of its own. It releases its mind to me, and it loses its own mind.
See, that's what happens.
Back to space.
There you are. You're back at the beginning of it all.
Lost its mind went out into the universe.
The reason why
No,
I
I
lost in
totally
space.
understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, because it sort of like loses the creatureness of itself, and it just becomes tracking. It looks like tracking. It's tracking me. And it doesn't really look like a creature because it's all the movement is from me. And I'm the creature. I'm the followed one.
Yeah.
So it might just come and greet you and then remain indifferent, like oh, it's a human being, and go back and you just can't make it do anything unless it decides to do it. So
if it had some sort of goal, what it wants to do. Does it want to somehow communicate? And if it can't communicate, does it change into something that it goes away and comes back in a different configuration that, okay, maybe this works, let's try again. And it starts to sort of like develop as a character more from this sort of like visualization that tracks the person.
And then we have Skynet after that.
And that's the way to Skynet,
Yeah, like I wasn't really happy with that one, that last one that you saw. Like, I mean, there was less possibility for it to develop, which was to do with the structure of my coding, basically, which was it was based on a program that I wrote in my master's and that I kind of developed from that. Really, I should have started from scratch and written it from scratch, because that's why the fluid one worked so much better. Because I was a lot better at coding, 2 or 3 years later after doing the masters than I was during. So that's why I was kind of trying to get away from coding a little bit. There was less. There seems to be, I don't know. There's less possibilities for for backtracking or for changing, for changing your mind. Once you've kind of written code, that's it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's either start a new project or go with what you have.
Yeah.
And I think that does.
Yeah, I definitely know that.
Yeah.
We did this demonstration in the spring, the ornaments thing, and after that I've been reprogramming all the way now, so it's been half a year. And today I realized that I'm at this exact same point as I was in the spring, except I've done everything again because it wasn't good, and I used half a year for getting into the exact same position that I was before. Now it's a lot better.
Yeah.
Of course, it's next iteration, but the iteration
Took
interval
half a year.
is, of course, I've done other things at the same time, but still, it's really, really hard, and it takes time, of course.
Yeah, it's difficult to know when to get out of something, like if you've gone too far, or if you've gone down the road.
What is the music?
This is what I was just going to do. This is the music now. So I've decided to demo it without visuals. But this is a very basic music setup. It's just basically mapping the keys on a MIDI, on a virtual MIDI keyboard, and a FM synth, and just moving the body across. So it's just basically mapping the keys on the keyboard. Anybody who wants can go and have a look at the patch on the computer. But in the performance, there was the music was much more based on acceleration, and it was much more emergent as well. The composition, which was something that was wound up, as I was saying earlier, it was kind of wound up over the course of the performance, based on the speed of her movement, right, and a centripetal force as well.
In that section that you showed, and then in the other section where she's singing, I think I seem to remember Aidan was working off of, he was actually catching bits of her song and processing it, feeding it back to her in real time. So then it was a bit like having a really big loop station, and playing. In the performance she did a solo where most of that section it was her singing the song.
That was an FFT transform, fast Fourier transform, which kind of takes the pitch of the voice, discretizes it, as in computationalizes, maps it into computer code, but keeps the same, the fundamental frequency. You can, if she sang into the microphone, the computer would be able to say it can recreate. Well, it can recreate, I think, up to 5 frequencies, is that right, or something like that? Well, as many as you want, but there's generally 5. But the fundamental frequency, if you hear that in a sine tone, and if you hear her sing, and if you hear the fundamental frequency played back, you go, oh yeah, that's exactly the same tone. So that was used then to set the the tone of the computer plants singing back to Regan. So there was this kind of mimicking going on, which was interesting. It was really good. But this is stopped working, has it? No, it hasn't. Yeah. So that's basically the 3 main architectures that were used for building the performance. But yeah, like I know what you mean about like getting this kind of like intelligent system or semi-intelligent system. That's something that learns or evolves by itself. And to be honest, the sound did do that. I mean, that was our goal with the sound,
It doesn't really have to be, artificial intelligence. It can be really quite a simple set of rules that it does.
Yeah.
And they can be controlled by an operator, or it can be controlled by the software itself. But it doesn't really have to be this complex artificial intelligent code. And it can be quite simple and still look like there's intelligence in it, and it has enough parameters to work with. But if it has limited parameters, it's
the first visual was more successful in that sense, I thought, from a point of view of
something that went through, from a point of view of the theatrical representation, it went through a process of change, as a character would. And I think that the floor projection was more successful from that point of view.
And that's also one thing that is interesting in this kind of performance is that now we're dealing with surfaces, or like if there would be some objects, like some three-dimensional objects involved, and then you could project on the objects and stuff like that. It could give another dimension to the whole thing. Because that was really interesting when she was dancing with the floor thing, because it was projection on her also, and that gave again a feeling that she's more involved.
Yeah.
And maybe also the setup, if it would be like you could have some very simple objects that would be mapped in the projection part, that would give a totally new dimension to the whole thing.
You did some stuff with real projection mapped objects, didn't you, in codes?
Yeah. We had two set pieces. One was a big kind of sculpture of cubes upstage left, and then there was a smaller piece that was upstage right. And there were 2-3 guys working on just that, on the 3D mapping. Nothing else,
Yeah. See, that's it. Like, I mean, you need an army of programmers now. That's the other issue,
Yeah.
And like, what programmer in their right mind would work for art when they can go and work in a bank and program? You could just fiddle around with system code and get paid $80,000 a year. Who's going to work on an art project?
So we need to look at an anthill, the artificial intelligence going on with ants. There's a simple set of rules for each ant, and they follow those rules, but they make a very complex system.
I think things like cell division algorithms are really interesting in that respect as well, which is something that I've kind of wanted to look at but haven't quite gone there yet. But that's more along the lines of what you're talking about, like an emergence or something, a graphic that can change over the.
As a spectator, I sort of like from the performance. As a spectator, I need sort of like something that changes.
Yeah.
Something, and if there are enough changes, it starts to sort of like it doesn't make me fall asleep, basically. that's it. And if things kind of like stay the same for really long times and really don't evolve anywhere, I start to sort of like lose focus and start to wander in my thoughts. But that's just me.
That's called meditation.
That's called Anto-Chekhov.
Did you see the Stellar performance in the Science Gallery?
No. But I've been to a couple of his events.
I've seen him.
Yeah. Was this when he was speaking, or?
Yeah, he did. But he did a thing with the Connect.
Oh, I know. I didn't see
it was over. Like, it went on for about an hour, but he was just like this. And he just did that for about an hour, and it was just.
But he's always done that.
That reminds me of a project that the students from the Tampere University of Applied Sciences did a couple of years back, where using Kinect, they made an installation where you had to stay absolutely still in order for things to happen.
Yes.
So you first went in there and did like this, and nothing happened.
Oh, yeah.
And when you remember that?
Yeah, it was a good idea.
Yeah.
The execution wasn't so good.
No, but
the idea was good.
Yeah. So when you stay still and what's going on, then things start to happen.
I did play something like that actually in the Pompidou Centre. They had a thing, you might have heard of it, I think it's called Mind Ball or something like that. And you had this competitor, basically. You had to get the ball to roll into your competitor's goal. Okay. It was like a little football pitch thing. But there was this magnetic ball but you basically had to completely relax. And if you didn't relax, then the ball started rolling towards you.
So there was basically the person who was
The brainwave.
the brain waves. You had to calm your brain down as much as possible. But then, like, once you see the ball rolling towards you, you start freaking out. So it's quite good. So it was really good.
Yeah, that's the only game that's fun to lose.
It only indicates that you haven't had your lobotomy yet.
And then you what?
A lobotomy, which is
Oh yeah, sure, yes.
So does anybody want to have a look at the programs on the computer, or the motion tracking program on the computer up there, or anything like that? Or do you have any questions?
I won't be able to understand anything,
Yeah.
but I can still take a look.
I've seen it.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.